Hey everyone, welcome back. Tonight we're exploring one of history's most elaborate and fascinating belief systems, how ancient Egyptians prepared for, experienced, and survived death itself. Because for them, death wasn't an ending. It was a dangerous journey through the underworld that required preparation, knowledge, and more than a little divine favor. Before we dive in, if you enjoy these deep historical explorations, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love seeing our global community come together over ancient mysteries. When most people think about ancient Egypt, they picture pyramids, mummies, and golden burial masks. But beneath all that spectacle was something far more profound, a civilization that spent enormous resources, time, and intellectual energy solving one fundamental problem: how to survive after you stop breathing. The ancient Egyptians didn't fear death the way many cultures did. They feared the journey that followed it. Death was merely a transition, a doorway into a realm as real and complex as the living world. But this realm, called the Duat, was filled with dangers that could destroy your soul permanently if you weren't prepared. Let's start with what Egyptians believed happened the moment you died. Your physical body stopped functioning, obviously, but you, the essential you, fragmented into several spiritual components. The most important were the Ka, your life force, and the Ba, your personality and individual essence. These parts needed to be reunited with your body for you to continue existing in the afterlife. This is why mummification mattered so desperately. It wasn't about preserving a corpse for sentimental reasons. It was about maintaining a physical anchor for your spiritual self. Without an intact body, your Ka and Ba had nowhere to return. You would simply cease to exist, dissolved into nothingness. For Egyptians, this permanent erasure was the true terror, not death, but eternal oblivion. The mummification process was elaborate, expensive, and deeply ritualistic. It took 70 days to complete properly. The body was washed, internal organs removed and preserved separately in canopic jars, and the corpse dried with natron salt. What remained was wrapped in linen with protective amulets placed between the layers. Each step was accompanied by prayers and spells designed to protect the deceased during their journey. But even a perfectly preserved mummy wasn't enough. You needed equipment for the journey ahead. The tomb became a carefully stocked survival kit for the afterlife. Food, drink, clothing, furniture, tools, weapons, and even servants in the form of Shapti figures, small statues that would magically come to life to work on your behalf in the underworld. Wealthy Egyptians filled their tombs with staggering amounts of goods. Pharaohs were buried with entire treasuries. But even ordinary people scraped together what they could, because arriving in the afterlife unprepared meant facing challenges with no resources. Better to be buried with a few loaves of bread than to starve eternally. Now, let's talk about the journey itself. The Duat was not a peaceful place. It was a dark, twisting netherworld filled with hostile demons, lakes of fire, rivers that flowed backward, and gates guarded by creatures with knives for hands and heads of serpents. Navigating this realm required knowledge, specific knowledge of spells, passwords, and secret names. This is where the Book of the Dead comes in. Despite its ominous title, it wasn't a single book. It was a collection of spells, instructions, and maps designed to guide the deceased through the underworld safely. Wealthy families commissioned personalized copies written on papyrus and placed them in the tomb. The text told you how to appease guardians, cross dangerous waters, and defend yourself against demons who wanted to devour your soul. Some spells transformed you into powerful beings, a falcon, a lotus flower, or even a god, to escape danger. Others gave you the words to speak at crucial moments. Imagine standing before a gate in the underworld, and a terrifying guardian blocks your path, demanding the secret name of the doorpost. If you knew the answer, you passed. If you didn't, you were destroyed. The journey culminated in the most critical moment, the weighing of the heart ceremony. This took place in the Hall of Two Truths, where the god Osiris sat in judgment, surrounded by 42 divine assessors. Your heart, considered the seat of your emotions and moral character, was placed on a scale. On the other side sat the feather of Maud, representing truth,
justice, and cosmic order. If your heart was lighter than the feather, meaning you had lived a just and truthful life, you passed. You were welcomed into the field of reeds, a paradise that mirrored the best parts of Egypt: fertile land, abundant harvests, and eternal peace.
But if your heart was heavy with wrongdoing, it tipped the scale. And then came Ammit, the Devourer, a creature with the head of a crocodile, the body of a lion, and the hindquarters of a hippopotamus. She waited beside the scale, and if you failed, she consumed your heart entirely. You were erased from existence. No afterlife, no second chances, gone. What's fascinating is that Egyptians didn't view this judgment as arbitrary divine whim. It was cosmic law, as inevitable as the sun rising. Ma'at was the principle holding reality together. Living in alignment with Ma'at meant speaking truth, acting justly, and maintaining balance. The judgment simply revealed whether you had done so. To help ensure a favorable outcome, Egyptians included a negative confession in their Book of the Dead, a list of sins they swore they hadn't committed. I have not killed. I have not stolen. I have not caused pain. Whether this was honest accounting or strategic self-presentation remains debatable, but it shows how seriously they took moral responsibility. The gods played essential roles in this journey. Anubis, the jackal-headed god of embalming, guided souls through the Duat and oversaw the weighing ceremony. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom and writing, recorded the results. Osiris, who had himself died and been resurrected, ruled the underworld and granted access to the afterlife. These weren't distant, abstract deities. They were active participants in your survival. Egyptians also believed the living could help the dead. Offerings of food, drink, and incense at tombs weren't just symbolic gestures. They believed these items magically sustained the deceased in the afterlife. Families visited tombs regularly, recited prayers, and performed rituals to ensure their ancestors remained nourished and remembered. Neglecting the dead was dangerous, not just for the deceased, but potentially for the living as well, since unhappy spirits could cause trouble. This interdependence between the living and the dead created a continuous cultural cycle. The afterlife wasn't a separate realm you disappeared into. It remained connected to the world of the living. Tomb walls were painted with scenes of daily life, not out of nostalgia, but because these images magically allowed the deceased to continue experiencing those activities. Social status profoundly affected your afterlife prospects. Pharaohs received elaborate tombs, vast quantities of burial goods, and extensive magical texts. Common people received far less. Some were buried in simple graves with minimal provisions. This inequality extended beyond death, suggesting that Egyptian society accepted hierarchical differences as part of cosmic order. Yet even within this stratification, ordinary people found ways to prepare. They saved for years to afford basic mummification. They commissioned modest tomb decorations. They memorized key spells. The democratization of afterlife beliefs, where eventually even non-royals could access the same spells and protections, shows that these ideas were deeply important across all levels of society. The physical tombs themselves were designed as both protective fortresses and functional homes. Early mastabas gave way to pyramids and eventually rock-cut tombs in the Valley of the Kings. These structures weren't just impressive monuments. They were engineered to protect the body from thieves, preserve the deceased's possessions, and create a sacred space where the living and dead could interact. But tomb robbery was rampant. The very wealth buried to sustain the dead in the afterlife made tombs irresistible targets. Robbers risked curses, divine punishment, and legal execution to plunder these riches. Despite elaborate traps, hidden chambers, and religious warnings, tombs were often emptied within generations of being sealed. This meant that many carefully prepared journeys to the afterlife were sabotaged before they fully began. The Egyptian afterlife wasn't static paradise or eternal punishment. It was active existence. The field of reeds required work, plowing, planting, harvesting. This is why Shabti figures were included,
to do that work for you. Even in paradise, Egyptians couldn't imagine existence without labor and purpose. What's remarkable is how long these beliefs persisted. For over 3,000 years, Egyptian culture maintained this elaborate system of death preparation. Dynasties rose and fell, foreign powers conquered, languages evolved, but the fundamental belief that death required preparation and the afterlife was achievable through proper knowledge remained constant. These beliefs also reveal profound psychological insights. Egyptians understood that humans fear oblivion more than death itself. By creating a detailed, navigable path through death, they transformed terror into something manageable. You could prepare, you could study, you could take concrete actions that increased your chances of eternal survival.
The obsession with the afterlife also drove incredible cultural achievements. The need to preserve bodies led to sophisticated understanding of chemistry and anatomy. The desire to protect tombs produced architectural marvels. The requirement for magical texts created one of history's earliest widespread literary traditions. Modern people often view Egyptian death practices as morbid or obsessive, but from within the culture, they represented ultimate optimism. Death was conquerable. Eternity was accessible. The universe was ordered enough that if you learned the rules and lived properly, you could achieve immortal existence. When we look at the archaeological remains, the tombs, the mummies, the books of the dead carefully inscribed on papyrus, we're seeing evidence of a civilization that refused to accept death as an ending. They engineered, planned, and ritualized their way toward eternity with astonishing determination. The ancient Egyptian journey to the afterlife wasn't passive acceptance of death. It was active resistance against oblivion, a sustained cultural project spanning millennia. They built monuments that would outlast empires, preserved bodies that would survive thousands of years, and wrote spells designed to echo through eternity. In the end, the ancient Egyptians achieved a kind of immortality, though perhaps not the one they intended. We remember them not because their souls successfully navigated the Duat, but because their determination to do so left traces profound enough to fascinate us millennia later. Their pyramids still stand. Their mummies still rest in museums. Their spells can still be read. And in that persistence of memory, maybe they won their battle against oblivion after all, just in a way they never could have predicted. Death was just the beginning, and the journey continues even now, in our continued fascination with how desperately they fought to survive it.